Do not watch this alone. What happened in the trenches of Osowiec Fortress was never fully documented. In fact, some of the most disturbing reports were sealed away, hidden from public view for over a century. We're going to unseal them now. Our story takes us to northern Poland. The year is 1915. World War I is raging, and Osowiec Fortress stands as a critical defensive point. But this isn't just a battlefield of bullets and bombs. It's a place shrouded in a perpetual, thick fog. There are no clear paths through the dense woods and crumbling earthworks surrounding the fortress. Only an endless sea of mist and the lingering echoes of what once occurred here. It's a landscape that seems to exist outside of time, where the normal rules of reality don't apply. The soldiers garrisoned at Osowiec were hardened veterans, accustomed to the horrors of war. But what they encountered in that fog was something else entirely. It began with strange sightings. Figures, just at the edge of vision, moving through the mist. Their movements were described as jerky, unnatural, like puppets on unseen strings. Then came the whispers. Soldiers on watch would hear their own names being called softly, carried on the damp air. They would spin around, rifle at the ready, but no one was there. The source of the voices could never be located. It was as if the fog itself was speaking to them. One chilling account comes from a four-man patrol sent to scout the perimeter. The mist was so dense they could barely see the man in front of them. As they navigated a flooded trench, they froze. Standing motionless about 50 yards ahead was a figure. It looked human, wearing what seemed to be a tattered uniform, but it wasn't alive. It just stood there, unblinking, watching them. The patrol leader raised his hand, signaling his men to hold their position. He called out, his voice swallowed by the fog. There was no reply. The figure didn't move a muscle. It just watched. Gathering their courage, the soldiers began to advance cautiously, weapons raised. They took one step, then another. And just as they closed the distance, the figure seemed to dissolve, vanishing into the white haze, as if it were never there. They found no footprints, no broken twigs, nothing to suggest anyone had been standing there at all. As days turned into weeks, the strange phenomena escalated. The mist, always a present feature of the landscape, began to behave unnaturally. It would roll in suddenly, thickening to the point where visibility was reduced to zero, even in the middle of the day. The soldiers reported that the shadows between the trees seemed to stretch and writhe, taking on lives of their own. The feeling of being followed became a constant companion for anyone who dared to venture outside the main fortress walls. They would hear footsteps crunching on the dead leaves just behind them, but whenever they turned, the forest was empty and silent. The air itself felt different in these moments. It grew heavier, colder, and some claimed it felt alive, as if they were walking through the belly of some vast, unseen creature. Morale plummeted. Men who had faced machine gun fire without flinching were now terrified of the encroaching twilight and the secrets the fog held. As nightfall descended upon Osowiec, a profound and unsettling quiet would settle over the fortress. It wasn't a peaceful silence, but a heavy, expectant one, the kind of quiet that feels like the world is holding its breath. The whispers didn't stop with the darkness. If anything, they grew more frequent, more intimate, slithering out of the fog and into the minds of the terrified soldiers. The mist itself seemed to possess a malevolent intelligence. It pressed against the windows of the barracks, clung to the stone walls, and seemed to watch every movement of those who remained inside. The men knew they weren't alone. Something ancient and terrible had been awakened in this place, and it was watching them from the fog. And what happened when it finally decided to stop watching and start acting is a story for another time. If you think the Great War is a chapter closed in a history book, you're mistaken. There are places where the echoes of cannon fire never truly fade, where the screams of the dying still hang in the air. One such place is Osowiec Fortress. They say death never rests there, it waits. The battle for Osowiec in 1915 was a nightmare made real. German forces unleashed a wave of chlorine and bromine gas, a greenish-yellow cloud that rolled over the Russian trenches. It was supposed to be the end. The gas dissolved lungs, turned skin black, and burned away the very breath of life. The Germans advanced, expecting to find only corpses, but what they found was something else entirely. Out of the toxic fog, the dead rose. Russian soldiers, their faces wrapped in blood-soaked rags, skin peeling from bone, coughing up pieces of their own lungs, charged. This was the attack of the dead men, a moment of such horrific bravery it became legend. But legends have a way of lingering. After the war, the survivors of Osowiec tried to return to normal lives. They tried to forget the green fog and the faces of their resurrected comrades. Yet, the battlefield wasn't done with them. Some reported the distinct, heavy sound of military boots following them down quiet, empty streets. Others would catch glimpses of gaunt figures in tattered uniforms, standing just outside their windows at night, motionless in the rain. And some just disappeared. Friends and family would search, but it was as if they had been erased from existence. Their last known whereabouts a mystery, their final moments swallowed by a past that refused to stay buried. The fortress, it seemed, had a long and possessive memory. This brings us to a story, one you won't find in any official records. A few decades ago, a group of urban explorers, scavengers really, heard the whispers of Osowiec. Lured by the promise of forgotten relics and wartime artifacts, they ventured into the swamps surrounding the decaying fortress. They were thrill-seekers, armed with cameras and a misplaced sense of confidence, completely unaware of what they were stepping into. The day was grim, the sky a blanket of gray, but it was the coming night that held the true terror. As dusk settled, a thick, unnatural fog began to rise from the marshlands. It wasn't a normal fog. It was heavy, wet, and smelled of damp earth and something else, something metallic and vaguely chemical. The air grew cold, and the group's cheerful banter died down, replaced by an uneasy silence. That's when they first heard it. A soft, wet sound, like breathing. Labored, struggling breathing, but it wasn't coming from any of them. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, a chorus of unseen lungs fighting for air. One of the explorers, a young man named Ivan, raised his flashlight, its beam cutting a weak path through the dense mist. The light caught something, a shape. It was tall, impossibly thin, and wore the remnants of a World War I Russian uniform. The fabric was rotted, caked in mud, but the silhouette was unmistakable. Then another shape appeared beside it, and another. Figures were rising from the swampy ground, pulling themselves from the mud, with slow, deliberate movements. They weren't zombies in the way movies show them. They were silent, their eyes black, empty voids. Their mouths hung open in a permanent, soundless gasp. And from the darkness all around, that same wet, gurgling cough echoed, a sound that had haunted this land for decades. The scavengers were no longer alone. They were in the company of the dead men of Osowiec. Panic erupted. The group scattered, running blindly into the fog-choked swamp, their screams swallowed by the mist. Only one of them, a man named Alexei, made it out that night. His account is the reason this story is told. He spoke of running for what felt like hours until he stumbled into a clearing. What he saw there froze the blood in his veins. In the center of the clearing, a circle of those same spectral soldiers stood, perfectly still, their backs to him, facing inward. The trees around the clearing were all bent, their branches twisted as if reaching for something at the circle's center, yet held back by an unseen force. On the ground were strange patterns made of bones, he hoped hand pieces of rusted, twisted metal, and hovering directly above the circle was a cloud of black smoke. It didn't drift or disperse. It just hung there, motionless and silent, absorbing the faint moonlight. Alexei hid, watching, unable to move or scream. He doesn't know how long he was there. He lost time. It could have been minutes, or it could have been days. His next memory was of waking up at the edge of the swamp as dawn broke, his clothes torn, his body covered in scratches. He was hollowed out, a shell of the man who had entered the swamp. He was changed. The other scavengers were never found. Alexei's descriptions of the figures have been disturbingly consistent with other whispered accounts over the years. He spoke of a tall, officer-like figure with a gaze that never blinked, its eyes fixed on some distant, unseen horror. He described another soldier, one whose leg was bent at an impossible angle, who limped through the fog with a jerky, unnatural gait. These apparitions never seemed to chase their victims. They would just appear, watching from a distance, their presence a cold weight on the soul. But if you noticed them, if your eyes met theirs, they would begin to move. Not running, just getting closer. With every glance away and back, they would be nearer, their silent vigil turning into a slow, inevitable advance. Among the items recovered from the expedition was a single damaged video camera. The lens was shattered, the video footage corrupted beyond repair. But the audio survived. Forensic experts who analyzed the recording isolated something chilling. Behind the sounds of panicked running and heavy breathing from the operator, another sound can be heard. It's faint, a dry, raspy whisper, repeating the same phrase in Russian over and over again. Translated, it says, "You walked where the dead remembered. Now you belong." That audio file was officially sealed, deemed too disturbing for public release. It exists only as a classified file in a forgotten archive, another dark secret held by the swamp. So, listen closely. Osowiec Fortress is more than a historical site. It's a grave. It's a wound on the face of the earth that has never healed. And it's a warning. The dead are not gone. The battlefield does not forget, and it does not forgive. They say that if you ever find yourself walking in a cold, heavy mist and you hear the sound of a wet, rattling cough nearby, do not turn and run. They say running only excites them. Where every story promises to give you a new nightmare.